The mountains of eastern Afghanistan had a way of swallowing sound. Men who had walked those slopes for generations believed the valleys could hear intentions before footsteps. For the SEALs of the small, unnamed task unit deployed out of Bagram in late 2002, that superstition carried an uncomfortable amount of truth. Every mission demanded a silence so total that even the click of a safety lever could echo down a ridge like an accusation. The target that night was a mid-level Al-Qaeda facilitator known on intelligence boards as Hafiz Qadir. He wasn't a battlefield commander. He didn't appear in propaganda videos. He wasn't even on the CIA's public most wanted lists. But he had something far more dangerous. A courier network linking foreign fighters hidden in Nuristan, the safe houses across the Pakistan border. The network was small, disciplined, and nearly invisible. And unless someone cut its head off, the next wave of attacks against Kabul might be planned with near-perfect secrecy. Hours before the mission, the SEALs gathered inside a dim TOC built from plywood and sandbags. Drone feeds played silently on a projection screen, the ghostly outlines of rooftops, animal pens, and terrace farms flickering under infrared. An NSA intelligence tech sat cross-legged near the floor, replaying an intercepted message. The men listened to the linguist's translation. He arrives before first call to prayer. He never stays long. There is one guard, thin, older. That was the kind of intelligence that shaped how special operators breathed. The assault plan was built on a principle that had become a SEAL trademark. Zero-light infiltration. No visible lasers, no strobes, no IR chem lights. Nothing that could betray the team to a lookout scanning the ridge lines with night-adapted eyes. They would climb 2,000 feet of broken shale in total darkness, navigate across an exposed saddle with crosswinds sharp enough to knock a man off balance, and descend into a village that didn't appear on any official Afghan map. The MH-47 pilots dropped them on a higher ridge at 2:06. The rotors never stopped turning. The aircraft never touched the ground. The men slid down the fast ropes like falling shadows. 30 seconds later, the valley reclaimed its silence. The climb took nearly an hour. Each operator moved with the rehearsed rhythm of men who had memorized every contour of the terrain model. The moonless sky provided cover, but also stole depth perception. Rocks shifted under boots, and more than once, the point man froze after thinking he heard breathing on the wind. Halfway down the far slope, the team made its first stop. Overwatch elements positioned themselves behind a collapsed stone wall overlooking the village. They calibrated their thermals, scanning for human shapes. One figure appeared briefly, a man stepping out to relieve himself, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He disappeared again. Below them, the assault element advanced toward the compound where Qadir was believed to sleep. The location had been confirmed only once, by a drone feed catching him exiting the building at dawn 3 days prior. Intelligence like that expired fast. The team knew this could be a clean grab, or an empty room with a war mat and no answers. At 3:17, the breacher signaled readiness. He placed a microcharge at the inner gate, just enough to pop a primitive bolt without waking the valley. The countdown was whispered through the team's bone conduction mics. 3-2 execute. The charge emitted a soft thud, more like a heavy book dropped on a carpet. The door swung inward. The point man flowed through the opening, rifle raised, muzzle steady. Inside the courtyard, a dog stirred, lifted its head, then lowered it again. A single incandescent bulb flickered near the far door of a mud brick room. 2 operators entered, their movements synchronized a fractions of a second. One covered high, the other low. A figure lay on a thin bedding mat, his outline unmistakable in thermal. Adult male, alone. "Hands," one whispered in Dari. The man froze. Hands rose slowly. But it wasn't Qadir. It was his brother, a farmer, terrified, shaking, insisting he knew nothing. A quick exploitation of the room confirmed it. No radio, no ledger, no documents, no foreign SIM cards, nothing that matched Al-Qaeda's courier protocols. The mission had hit a wall. The team leader signaled the intel specialist. "We're off." Something shifted. Recheck feeds. Up on the ridge, the Overwatch sniper scan again. And that's when he saw it. A secondary structure they had ignored, a small stone shed partially carved into the hillside. A heat signature inside. Not moving. Not sleeping either. Got a hot spot. Size of a sitting adult. Not on the manifest. The team leader didn't hesitate. Retask. New breach point. They moved as one, folding around the back of the compound, stepping over a narrow irrigation channel without disturbing a pebble. The breacher examined the shed. Primitive lock. Wooden door swollen from years of weather. He didn't use an explosive. The pop would carry too far. Instead, he forced a slow mechanical pry, inch by inch, guided by touch alone. When the door finally opened, the smell hit them, diesel, sweat, and paper. Inside was Qadir, sitting at a makeshift desk, sorting coded messages. A satellite phone lay beside him. He reached for it instinctively. The operator nearest to him grabbed his wrist, twisted, and pinned him without a sound. The entire takedown lasted less than 4 seconds. On the ridge, Overwatch saw the thermal silhouette collapse. "Target secure," the team leader whispered. Extraction began immediately. The SEALs moved uphill carrying their prisoner, maintaining the same tempo, the same silence. Every step measured against the risk of villagers waking. The helo returned in a low nap of the earth approach, blending its noise into the wind tunneling through the valley. By sunrise, Qadir was already inside a CIA black site near Bagram, providing details about safe houses and couriers he believed the Americans already knew about. They didn't. The intel he revealed in the next 72 hours would trigger 2 additional operations, including one that would become Chapter 2 of this documentary. That night, the valley had gone silent because the SEALs made it so. But the echoes of what they achieved reverberated across every Al-Qaeda channel, from Kos to Peshawar. The roads southwest of Fallujah were the kind of place where time felt elastic. Hours stretched into days, and seconds could collapse a life. For the SEALs of Task Unit Trident, operating out of a joint SOCOM outpost in 2005, this reality was carved into bone. Every rooftop hit a spotter. Every alley whispered threats. It was a city stitched back together after war, but never truly repaired. And somewhere in that labyrinth of concrete and cinder block, an Al-Qaeda cell was holding an American contractor and 2 Iraqi interpreters, alive for a moment. The rescue mission began not with a call for help, but with a mistake. An Al-Qaeda courier intercepted outside Amaria was carrying a battered Nokia phone. Inside it, buried under layers of deleted logs, the NSA found a voicemail the captors never meant to save. Bring him before the filming at sunrise. The linguist didn't need to explain what filming meant. Sunrise was less than 10 hours away. Inside the outpost, the Joint Operations Center snapped into motion. Analysts scrubbed drone feeds from the past 24 hours, comparing heat signatures, movement patterns, and electronic noise. A particular 3-story house stood out. Its rooftop activity didn't match the rest of the neighborhood. Too many comings and goings. Too many shortwave bursts detected by SIGINT. And at 2:14 that night, a drone captured something unmistakable. A man carrying a tripod. The SEAL team leader stared at the feed, hands folded, expression frozen. That's the house. We don't get a second shot. Planning had to compress days into minutes. They mapped out walls, alleyways, doors, and elevation based on grainy infrared captures. They had no floor plan, no interior intel, no idea how many fighters were inside. And yet, they were expected to retrieve hostages alive. This was the reality of Iraq in 2005. Missions launched because waiting even 30 more minutes meant a corpse on video. At 3:40, the assault force boarded a pair of MH-60 Blackhawks. The pilots flew nap of the earth, hugging terrain so tightly that buildings seemed to scrape the rotors. Every movement was a gamble, because the enemy possessed RPGs and knew the aircraft routes. The SEALs sat in silence, checking gear by touch. Breaching tools, suppressed carbines, flex cuffs, medical kits, microcharges calibrated to blow doors without killing hostages inside. The team had rehearsed hostage rescues 1,000 times. None of those rehearsals matched what awaited them. The landing was a skid drop. The Blackhawks barely kissed the ground. The SEALs poured out into the dust-choked alley, disappearing before the pilots even pulled power. Overhead, A single Predator drone banked slowly, its sensor operator calling out movement through secure comms. 2 heat signatures on the roof. 1 armed. The Overwatch sniper team peeled off, climbing a stack of broken masonry to gain a firing angle. Below them, the assault element crept toward the target building. They moved on cat paws, slow, deliberate, muzzles raised but steady. At the entrance, the breacher examined the door. Too thick for a silent pry, too fragile for a hard charge. A conventional detonation might injure the hostages on the other side. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a linear cutting charge, the kind used for surgical entry. "Stand by," he whispered. The countdown felt like a lifetime. 3, 2, 1. The charge hissed more than boomed, slicing the lock as if the metal had simply given up. The door swung inward. The first operator stepped into darkness, so total it swallowed him. Inside, the air stank of sweat, diesel, and fear. 2 fighters rounded a corner, AKs raised. The SEALs responded with controlled double taps, brass hitting the floor in neat, rhythmic intervals. A 3rd militant stumbled out of a side room, clutching a radio. He never raised it. Clear hallway 1. They advanced deeper. From the far room came a sound that froze the lead operator mid-step. A man crying through duct tape. "Hostage room located," the medic whispered. But between them and that room was a single reinforced door, impossible to blow without risking shrapnel. The team leader signaled. The breacher holstered his standard tools and pulled out something rarely used outside training, a water impulse charge. It was designed to blow a door inward using a shock wave neutralized by compressed water to minimize fragmentation. It was a near-perfect technique, yet the timing was flawless. Set. Stack. Execute. The blast kicked the door inward with a deep thump, like someone slamming a trunk. The team surged inside. A militant with a knife was crouched over the contractor, blade pressed to his throat. The operator nearest to him fired a suppressed round that severed the attacker's spinal cord before he could twitch. It had taken just 19 seconds to clear the entire floor. The 3 hostages were located, bound, dehydrated, and exhausted but alive. The contractor's eyes widened when he saw the American flag patch on the operator's shoulder. "You guys are real," he whispered. The extraction phase had just begun, and often it was deadlier than the entry. Outside, the street erupted. A pickup truck loaded with fighters had seen the helicopter dust signature. They were setting up an ambush at the alley's mouth. The Overwatch sniper called it in. Vehicles approaching fast. 6 to 8 fighters. RPGs spotted. What happened next became the centerpiece of a classified after-action review later taught across multiple SOCOM units. The SEALs didn't retreat. They advanced. A 2-man suppression element stormed the alley, using thermal cues and drone intel to preempt where the fighters would appear. 1 operator fired a burst at the man holding the RPG before he even cleared the truck bed. A 2nd truck tried to flank. The sniper took out the driver with a single shot. The vehicle rolled to a stop, engine hissing. Inside the target house, the medic checked the contractor's vitals. "We're good. Moving." The exfil came down to seconds. The pilots brought the helos back in low and hot, rotor wash scattering dust in violent spirals. The SEALs loaded the hostages while maintaining a 360-degree perimeter. A lone fighter appeared on a rooftop, setting up a PCAM. A SEAL marksman nailed a mid-pivot, not a moment too soon. Then the Black Hawks lifted, banking hard, carving through the smoky air with the hostages on board. From breach to extraction, the entire operation lasted 3 minutes and 48 seconds. Later, in a windowless room back at the outpost, an intelligence officer placed photos of the scene next to the drone timestamps and said quietly, "This is what precision looks like." The contractor survived. So did both interpreters. The Al-Qaeda media cell meant to film his execution was dismantled within days. For the SEALs, there was no celebration. No high fives, just gear checks, brief debriefs, and a new mission file waiting on the table. Because the intel recovered from the house, SIM cards, encoded ledgers, names, pointed to a courier system even larger than Qadir's network from Chapter 1. The borderlands between Afghanistan and Pakistan were a maze drawn by mountains rather than men. Lines on maps meant little here. What mattered were the goat paths carved through shale, the riverbeds that shifted every season, and the valleys that hid entire movements from the world's most advanced surveillance network. By 2007, Al-Qaeda had mastered this terrain with an efficiency that rivaled any intelligence service. Couriers, silent, loyal, invisible, moved messages faster than encrypted radios, faster than sat phones, faster than drones could react. The Americans knew the couriers existed. What they didn't know was how many, where they ran, or who coordinated them. That mystery began to crack open after the 4-minute rescue in Iraq. Among the files seized from the house was a name repeated in 3 different ledgers. Garib. In Arabic, the stranger. CIA analysts pinned it to a faceless node on the terrorism network map, a man responsible for routing messages from the tribal areas of Pakistan into Afghanistan's eastern corridor. He was the human equivalent of a neural hub. Take him out, and dozens of cells would collapse. But finding him? That was the hard part. By early spring 2007, JSOC and the CIA had created a joint task cell in Jalalabad dedicated solely to mapping courier patterns. They reviewed thousands of drone hours, human tips, intercepted radio fragments, and even market gossip. Analysts noticed an odd pattern. Every 11 to 14 days, a man wearing the same type of black turban stopped briefly at a small crossroads town on the Afghan side of the border. He never stayed more than 20 minutes. Always bought tea. Never sat. Never spoke to locals. This didn't prove anything, but it hinted at something. The SEALs were brought into the loop at 2:15 on a rainy morning. The team leader walked into the ops tent rubbing fatigue from his eyes. An intelligence officer pointed to a series of aerial stills pinned to a corkboard. In them, a single figure, grainy and indistinct, walked the same street at different times of day across 3 months. "We believe this is your man," the officer said. Same walk, same pattern, same blind spots. Blind spots. The officer nodded. He chooses alleys that drones don't have clear line of sight on. That's either luck or training. No one needed to say more. Over the next month, the team shadowed the courier's routine from the air. They watched how he adjusted routes when American patrols were nearby. They studied how he disguised his gait by shifting the weight of his satchel. They noted how he varied his timing, but never his ritual. Buy tea, stand in the same place, wait for a handoff. The handoff was everything. But it happened so fast that even 60 frames per second drone feeds struggled to catch it. A hand brushing another hand. A folded paper slipping from palm to palm. A satchel exchange with the casual indifference of men trading cigarettes. The breaking point came on a hot June evening. A drone orbit had captured something new. A glint of metal at the courier's waist. Not a weapon. Something too small. Too square. An SD card. Within hours, the mission shifted. The objective was no longer to observe the courier. It was to intercept him alive, without sparking a tribal war or violating Pakistani sovereignty. The SEAL team proposed a method rarely attempted along the border, an invisible snatch. Capture him between 2 light sources, where shadows could conceal movement from villagers and lookouts. They needed a place with no direct lines of sight, a place where the courier felt so safe he stopped checking over his shoulder. They found it, a narrow stone alley behind a butcher's stall, shielded from 3 angles, with a drainage ditch deep enough to hide 2 operators until a moment of grab. The timing had to be perfect. A second early, and the courier would run. A second late, and the handoff would occur, losing the intel forever. The infiltration began at dusk. The SEALs dressed as Afghan laborers, carrying baskets and tool bags. Their weapons are concealed beneath loose clothing, their radios hidden in woven satchels. For once, their greatest asset wasn't firepower. It was belonging. At 1841, the courier appeared. Below the drone feed, analysts murmured updates. Maintaining pace. Crossing the main street. Approaching stall. No armed escorts. The team leader breathed out slowly. It's tonight. 2 SEALs crouched inside the ditch, invisible from the street above. Another blended into a crowd outside the tea vendor. An overwatch element disguised as shepherds lingered on a hillside, keeping eyes on armed men moving between rooftops. When the courier stopped to buy his tea, everything converged. The man he usually received messages from never showed up. Instead, a youth approached with nervous eyes and a shaky hand. Something was wrong. Too many glances over the shoulder, too much fear. The courier leaned in, irritated. That was the moment. From the ditch, the first operator surged up, locking a hand around the courier's mouth. Another grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back. To anyone watching, it looked like three men embracing in a drunken scuffle. The youth who attempted the handoff bolted into the crowd. The operators dragged the courier into the shadows. His teacup smashed on the ground. The boy's satchel, dropped in panic, revealed what everyone feared and hoped. 3 SD cards, a folded map, a handwritten ledger. Within 90 seconds, the SEALs were gone. No gunfire, no alarms, no bodies, only dust settling in a quiet alley. They exfiltrated across the border, through a dry riverbed guided by drone infrared. The courier, blindfolded and bound, tried to speak twice. Each time he swallowed the words. At the safe house, CIA interrogators began with the smallest card. Inside was an encrypted sequence of message timestamps, each corresponding to a courier drop. But the second card was worse. It contained GPS pins of American patrol, routes recorded over months. The third was the most chilling, names of tribal elders scheduled for execution for cooperating with U.S. forces. But the ledger was a map of the entire courier network. Routes, night patterns, safe houses, cross-border tunnels, payment tallies, even drawings of drone flight paths. Information Al-Qaeda should not have possessed unless someone with technical knowledge had defected. The interrogator looked at the SEAL team leader and said what none of them wanted to hear. This isn't a courier network. It's an entire command node, and it's bigger than we thought. Over the next 48 hours, U.S. forces launched 6 separate operations, 3 Afghan commando raids, 2 drone target disruptions, and 1 clandestine SEAL action deep inside hostile territory. Nearly every operation succeeded. Al-Qaeda's courier system didn't just bend under pressure. It buckled. The capture of Garib, the stranger, triggered a collapse that intelligence agencies had attempted for over 5 years. For the SEAL team, the mission wasn't just another success. It was a turning point in the war, a moment when intelligence, timing, terrain mastery, and human instinct aligned so precisely that the entire battlefield shifted. And yet, the final chapter of this documentary would show a darker truth. Precision has a cost, and not all missions end clean. By 2009, Helmand Province had become the most studied piece of terrain in the entire war on terror. Every ridge, every spur, every goat path had appeared on drone feeds, SIGINT maps, and briefings inside windowless rooms from Bagram to Langley. And yet, despite all the technology, Helmand still devoured certainty. It was a place where mountains rose like walls, valleys funneled sound for miles, and a single misstep could turn an elite unit into a cautionary tale. For the SEAL platoon operating there that spring, the mission wasn't about capturing a courier, dismantling a network, or rescuing hostages. This time, it was retribution, the quiet, strategic kind carried out far from headlines. 2 weeks earlier, an American patrol had been ambushed in a narrow ravine north of Sadabad. 4 soldiers died in under 90 seconds. The attack was cleanly executed, almost too clean. The enemy didn't fire wildly or flee in panic. They initiated the ambush, committed, and then vanished with chilling precision. Someone had advised them, someone who had learned how American patrols think. That someone was believed to be Abu Tariq, an Al-Qaeda-linked tactician, known for training fighters in counter-patrol warfare. He was rumored to have served as a foreign fighter in Chechnya and Bosnia before resurfacing in eastern Afghanistan with particular specialty, building ambushes that erase escape routes. The CIA had been tracking him for months, but he kept slipping through drone envelopes by traveling under forest canopy and moving exclusively at night. He never used cell phones. He never stayed in the same village twice. He was a ghost among ghosts, until he made one mistake. During a meeting with a Taliban sub-commander, he allowed a fire to burn in a ridgetop hut longer than usual. A drone caught the heat bloom. ISR analysts back at Bagram cross-checked the timestamp with human reports. One name emerged. Abu Tariq may be present. Recommend action. JSOC authorized a mission immediately. The SEALs would insert via MH-47s, hike 7 kilometers under full blackout, ascend a ridge few Americans had attempted, and conduct a zero-light elimination. A surgical strike with no visible light, no muzzle flash, no infrared strobes. They would hit the hut, confirm the target, extract, and disappear before dawn. Anything less than perfect would get them killed. The Chinook flew at treetop level, hugging the valley floor in a pattern that made the crew chief mutter, "If we go any lower, we'll need a shovel." The rotors pulsed against the dark like a heartbeat. At 2:11, the team fast-roped onto a rocky clearing, boots touching ground with the softness of falling fabric. The helicopter peeled away without flaring lights. Silence reclaimed the valley. The team moved immediately. Their night vision goggles were dialed to ultra-low gain to avoid broadcasting even the faintest glimmer. Each man carried suppressed carbines, thermal imagers, IR-absorbing tape on their gear, and custom-modded comms rigs to keep signals tight and directional. This was the kind of mission where even breathing felt like a tactical compromise. The climb was punishing. Every step sent loose gravel tumbling. Operators froze each time, listening for dogs, fighters, or teenagers who sometimes slept outside in the warm months. At one point, the point man raised a fist. 2 men crouched. A figure walked across a ridge above them. Maybe a villager, maybe a scout, but the team didn't move until he was gone. They reached the target ridge at 3:48. The hut stood in a cluster of boulders, invisible to aircraft unless sunlight struck it at the correct angle. Smoke drifted from the chimney, a faint, barely visible thread. Thermal scans confirmed 6 heat signatures inside. One sat higher than the rest, sitting upright. Still, reading, perhaps. The analysts had guessed Tariq was a night owl. The team leader whispered, "Overwatch set?" A soft click answered, "Yes." 2 snipers settled behind rocks 60 meters upslope, using suppressors engineered for subsonic rounds that barely disturbed the air. The assault element crept toward the hut in a half-moon formation, each man checking sectors by muscle memory. At 5 meters out, the breacher inspected the door. Wood. Reinforced from inside. No metal lock. Too risky to blow. Too loud. Too visible. He placed a silent hydraulic wedge at the base, a tool rarely used, requiring flawless timing. The team leader tapped his wrist twice. Execute. The wedge expanded. The door hinges strained. A soft crack. The wooden frame split inward. The breacher pushed the door open with one gloved hand. The operators flowed inside, each selecting a target as if choosing pieces on a board. The first man saw a fighter reaching for a rifle leaning against the wall. A suppressed shot ended the motion before it began. The second man swept left, another fighter stirring in a blanket. 2 rounds. No noise but a sighing thump. The third man turned toward the center of the room. There he was. Abu Tariq sat cross-legged, staring directly at the operator, as if expecting him. A single suppressed shot hit center mass. The entire assault lasted less than 8 seconds. But something was wrong. A 7th heat signature flickered behind a partition. Small, weak, barely visible. The medic moved instantly. He pulled aside a canvas sheet and found a boy, maybe 10 years old, shivering, eyes wide, wrists tied. The boy was gagged but conscious. This was not in the mission brief. The team leader swore silently. The presence of a child turned the operation from surgical strike to crisis management. Extraction now required speed, stealth, and moral clarity. The medic checked him. Dehydrated, bruised, but alive. "Bring him," the team leader whispered. The SEAL carrying the boy wrapped him in a blanket to muffle sound. They stepped outside and froze. On the next ridge, a cluster of armed men appeared, moving carefully, scanning. Overwatch whispered into comms. Multiple fighters. 15 or more. Possibly responding to the gun's suppressed signatures. They're searching. The team leader made a decision in 3 seconds that later saved every life on the team. He ordered a reverse exfiltration, descending the opposite slope through near-vertical shale, into a streambed the intel team had flagged as non-navigable. No one had ever tried moving forces through it. They would be the first. The descent was brutal. Men slid, stumbled, caught themselves on exposed roots. The boy whimpered until the medic pressed a calming hand on his chest. Above them, fighters reached a hut, shouting, firing into the darkness. Tracer rounds arced overhead like angry comets. The SEALs kept moving, using dead-ground thermal cover and silence. When they reached the stream bed, ankle-deep water soaked their boots. A fighter entered the canyon above them, shining a flashlight down the slope. The beam cut through the darkness like a blade. The operators froze mid-step. The fighter paused, listening. A single splash would mean death. Then, mercifully, the man lowered the light and walked away. The SEALs continued. The pickup zone had changed. Too dangerous to return to the original LZ. The Chinook would extract them from a narrow river bend barely wide enough for its landing gear. At 5:07, when the horizon began to tint silver, rotor noise echoed faintly through the valley. The helicopter descended, kicking up spray. The team hustled the boy aboard, then boarded in 2 long strides. As they lifted off, fighters reached the ridge overlooking the river bend. A few fired wildly, rounds sparking off rocks. The door didn't return fire. The rules of the mission required no traceable U.S. engagement, unless an extremist. The Chinook banked hard and vanished into cloud cover. Inside, the boy began to cry, not out of fear, but relief. The medic offered him a water pouch. He drank 3 full sips before falling asleep against the operator's vest. The team sat in silence. They had eliminated one of Al-Qaeda's most effective tacticians. But they had also discovered something darker. Tariq had been training children as messengers and scouts. The boy confirmed it through a translator at the FOB. The war had entered a new phase, more desperate, more morally corrosive, more unpredictable. This mission taught the SEALs a harsh truth. Precision wasn't just about hitting the right target. It was about making the right decision when the battlefield shifted in the dark. And that lesson set the stage for the final chapter. If you approve, I'll continue with, by 2011, the war in Afghanistan had entered a paradoxical phase. The surge had flooded the South with troops. ISR platforms crowded the skies, and every major valley in Helmand Province had been mapped, photographed, and plotted with more precision than the highways of many American cities. Yet despite all this, the insurgency adapted faster than anyone predicted. They moved like smoke, shifting routes, blending into villages, trading weapons between clans to confuse pattern analysis. For the SEAL team still rotating between Kandahar and Helmand, the years since 2002 had carved deep lines in their faces. They had executed courier snatches, hostage rescues, cross-border infiltrations, targeted eliminations, intelligence raids, and deep reconnaissance missions. But the mission that awaited them in late August 2011 would test not only their precision, but their morality, instincts, and humanity in a way none of them were prepared for. The target was a man known only as the Engineer, a bomb maker whose IEDs had killed dozens of Marines across Helmand's green zone. He operated a workshop that moved every 3 days, buried in compounds, orchards, abandoned schools, and sometimes under goat sheds. His devices were notoriously sophisticated, triggered by pressure plates nearly impossible to detect, designed to mimic irrigation stones, hidden inside children's toys, even connected to solar batteries that recharged in daylight. The Engineer wasn't merely dangerous. He was cunning, methodical, and, according to intercepted communications, unusually calm for someone whose job was to blow people apart. What made him a priority target was a single message picked up by SIGINT analysts. Device ready for convoy. Before tomorrow's sunrise. A Marine convoy was scheduled to roll through the district at 6:30. The timeline was unacceptable. JSOC authorized a time-sensitive raid. 1 night, 1 chance, no margin. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A drone orbit that spotted a motorbike heading toward a cluster of mud compounds near the Helmand River. The rider carried a long sack. Thermal analysis suggested metal components inside. Too linear, too dense to be tools or farming equipment. The drone tracked the rider to a walled compound. Inside, Two figures emerged to greet him. Analysts zoomed in. One matched the height and gait signature of the engineer. Within minutes, a full target package was assembled. The SEALs loaded their gear. The rotors started turning. The clock began ticking. Insertion into a trap. At 1:12, two MH-47s lifted from Kandahar, flying low and fast toward the green zone. Helmand's irrigation canals shimmered like veins beneath them. The pilots weaved through them with inches of clearance. Everyone on board felt the tension. Even the aircraft frame seemed to tighten. The landing zone was a narrow patch of hard-packed dirt between poppy fields. The second the SEALs touched ground, the smell of Helmand hit them, wet soil animals and the sweet, faintly chemical scent of opium resin. They moved immediately, following a narrow footpath cut by farmers over generations. Night vision turned the world into ghostly greens and blacks. Heat waves drifted from irrigation ditches, warping their depth perception. When they reached the outskirts of the compound, they realized something was wrong. Too quiet. No dogs. No farmers. No night movement. The overwatch element scanned the rooftops. Negative movement, whispered the sniper. Feels like a dead zone. The team leader made a decision. This is deliberate. He's expecting someone. But the mission had no abort window. Precision demanded commitment. The compound gate was locked with a makeshift iron bar. The breacher placed a custom microcharge designed to break the bar without blowing the door apart. 3-2, execute. The charge cracked quietly, the door drifting open. Inside was a courtyard filled with tools, wires, batteries, and half-assembled devices. Everything pointed to the engineer's presence. But no men. The team fanned out, clearing each room with textbook perfection. A goat pen, a storage room, a sleeping cot, a workbench. Still no contact. Then the point man froze. A noise, soft, like someone shifting weight just behind the wall. The team leader signaled. Breach interior door. The breacher placed a hinge charge. But before he could trigger it, the sniper on Overwatch whispered urgently. Movement outside perimeter. 7, maybe 10 fighters. Circling. It was a trap. The engineer wasn't inside. He had set the compound as bait, loaded with IED components to lure Americans, then encircled it with fighters. But the SEALs were already committed. Continue breach, the team leader whispered. The charge detonated with a muffled thud. The door swung inward. 2 fighters rushed out firing wildly. Suppressed rounds cut them down before they crossed the threshold. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire raked the courtyard. Rounds punched into walls inches from operators' heads. The SEALs returned control bursts, using shadows as cover. The sniper team took out 2 fighters trying to flank the building, but movement increased. More shapes, more muzzle flashes, more shouting in Pashto. This wasn't a simple firefight. This was an execution zone. The engineer had anticipated drone routes. He had chosen blind spots. He had arranged cover where Americans couldn't see. He had mapped the battlefield long before the SEALs arrived. And then the world exploded. A blast ripped through the eastern wall. Dust engulfed the courtyard. Operators stumbled, ears ringing. The breacher hit the ground hard, shoulder bleeding where shrapnel tore through gear. IED, someone shouted. He had wired the courtyard. He knew exactly where Americans would step. The team regrouped, reorganizing under fire. The engineer wasn't just precise. He was calculating. He wanted to force them into one final mistake. The last second, the Overwatch sniper radioed with strain in his voice. He's here. East Ridge. I have eyes on the engineer. The SEAL team leader snapped toward the ridge, spotting a faint shape sprinting to the poppy fields, carrying something heavy, a long cylinder. The convoy bomb. He meant to complete his mission, even under fire. The sniper whispered, I have the shot, then paused. I can't. There's a child running beside him. Through thermal, they saw it. A boy, maybe 8 years old, running next to the engineer, holding onto his sleeve. The engineer used him deliberately. A human shield, a moral weapon. The sniper's finger hovered over the trigger. He whispered, voice cracking, clear my shot. The team leader froze. If the sniper waited, the bomb maker might escape. If he fired, he risked hitting the child. If they hesitated too long, the Marine convoy schedule for sunrise might drive into the deadliest IED of the entire year. Every second expanded and collapsed all at once. Then something happened no one predicted. The child tripped. He fell face first into the dirt. The engineer kept running. For a single heartbeat, one impossible, fleeting, perfect heartbeat. The sniper had a clean line. He exhaled, pressed the trigger. The engineer dropped. The cylinder rolled into the poppy stalks. The child sat up, coughing dust. Mission objectives complete. Convoy saved. SEAL team still alive, barely. But the victory fell hollow. The sniper whispered. 1 second later, and I would have hit the boy. The medic replied quietly. 1 second earlier, and that convoy would be gone. Extraction was a blur. The Chinooks landed in a storm of dust and gunfire. The SEALs loaded their wounded. The birds lifted. Helmand shrank below them, dark, broken, endless. At the FOB, they laid out the cylinder on a blast-proof table. It was confirmed as a pressure plate IED designed to obliterate armor vehicles. Its wiring was clean, flawless, sickeningly elegant. The engineer had been a master of precision. But on that ridge, in that last second, American precision proved stronger. Still, nobody celebrated. In the quiet of the hangar, the team leader summed up the entire documentary in a single sentence. Precision isn't just hitting what you aim at. It's knowing when you can't afford to miss.